COVID-19. And these things are moving at an incredibly rapid pace. The part that's discouraging is this idea that we should throw science to the wind. If we do that, if we throw away the scientific method, we are going to be in the same position in several months from now as we are today, with uncertainty about what is best for a patient with COVID-19.
But this isn't helped when people in power push unproven therapies.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine.
What do you have to lose? I'll say it again. What do you have to lose? Take it. I really think they should take it, but it's their choice. I just hope that hydroxychloroquine wins.
Hydroxychloroquine is an anti-malaria medication that also dampens the immune system. What kills people with COVID-19 is an uncontrolled overreaction of the immune system that attacks the lungs and heart and other organs. So immune suppressants like hydroxychloroquine might help.
The data for hydroxychloroquine is mixed. And one of the challenges with using that is at the end of the day, hydroxychloroquine is a form of an immune suppressant. It's used to treat forms of lupus and forms of sarcoidosis. And so it's critical that if we're going to be suppressing elements of the immune response, we know what we're suppressing and the timing of when we're suppressing it.
And there's another serious issue with hydroxychloroquine. Here's what happens electrically in the heart when it beats. Each electrical wave has a letter, P, Q, R, S, and T. The distance between the Q wave and the T wave is critical for controlling how safely the heart beats. People with severe COVID-19 can have a long QT interval, which puts them at peril of fatal heart rhythms. Hydroxychloroquine makes the QT interval even longer. There's an enormous range of treatments being suggested for COVID-19, from hydroxychloroquine to blood pressure drugs to sheep dip. There are broadly three approaches to treatment. One is to dampen the life-threatening immune overreaction. The second is to try to strengthen our resistance to the virus. That's the sheep dip angle. The drug is called ivermectin. And the third is to find a drug which kills the virus or stops it multiplying. The front runner in that race is a drug made by the pharmaceutical company Gilead, which has made a fortune from its suite of antiviral drugs for HIV and hepatitis C. The COVID-19 candidate is called remdesivir.
It was an update on 53 patients who'd received remdesivir under what's known as compassionate use. Now that's for
basically prevents the virus making copies of its own genetic material, and as a result then the virus can't replicate, it can't then infect more human cells. It stops the replication of the virus.
This is the holy grail in antivirals, namely a drug that can treat more than one virus. However, when they tried remdesivir in Ebola, it didn't work. So why think of it for this novel coronavirus?
We know that it works, as I say, in the laboratory against other members of the same family of viruses as this coronavirus. And so we believe, especially in this time of a pandemic health crisis, that it's worth exploring whether it has activity against COVID-19.
Gilead is taking a more traditional approach to testing remdesivir by using randomized controlled trials in hospitalized patients who receive the medication intravenously.
So there are multiple studies ongoing. So we have 2 studies of our own. China has had 2 studies ongoing since pretty much the start of their pandemic. And there are 2 other studies being run both in the US and Europe. And we're hopeful that we will have some initial data by the end of April.
The World Health Organization has launched a global crowdfunding effort to fund trials of hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir along with other medications. WHO hopes that this will accelerate findings which will tell whether these drugs work.
In the state of pandemic, we really have to hang on to our scientific principles of rigorous controlled clinical trials, and we can't abandon those scientific principles on the assumption that we don't have time to wait.
The future of Virgin Australia hangs in the balance tonight. The airline's after a $1.4 billion loan from the federal government, but so far the government's refusing. Chief Political Correspondent Laura Tingle reports.
Here are the bleeding hearts that come in here and tell us that they're concerned about what is happening to the flying public of Australia.
The government should now cancel the two-airline agreement and allow more operators onto our air routes.
For around 50 years, a two-airlines policy kept all but two competitors out of major Australian flight routes, a duopoly designed to ensure air services across the country could be delivered profitably.
When you want to fly, come fly the friendly way.
The duopoly between the government-owned TAA and privately owned Ansett Airlines founded in the 1990s with industry deregulation.
Tonight, Ansett is dead again.
A decade later, facing a range of cost problems and under the weight of competitive pressure from Qantas and fledgling airlines like Virgin Blue, Ansett subsequently collapsed in 2002.
A lot of the pilots that are now flying at various airlines within Australia, including Virgin, do have experience at Ansett, and they would be thinking, oh no, not this again.
Fast forward another 18 years, and amid the economic shock of the coronavirus, the Morrison government faces the same question as the Menzies government in the 1950s. Is it prepared to allow a domestic aviation monopoly?
When Ansett collapsed, Qantas really dominated every domestic route. It wasn't a lot of fun for the airports and the local communities because they had to deal essentially with one carrier.
Having successfully started life as budget carrier Virgin Blue, Virgin Australia changed its market pitch to try to capture some of the lucrative business travel market from Qantas. It was a move which saddled the airline with big debts and provoked a series of ferocious price wars with Qantas. Passengers were the winners.
When Virgin entered the market, average airfares decreased sharply.
Despite attempts to cut costs and debt, Virgin has been hit much harder by the shock of the coronavirus lockdown than Qantas. On Tuesday, it announced a second trading halt on the stock exchange as it sought help from the federal government. But the government has been taking a hard line.
We haven't been picking any winners or picking any favourites here. What we've been doing is ensuring we're getting sector-wide support.
Virgin has asked for a $1.4 billion loan from the government, or at least a government guarantee on some of its borrowings. Despite tough language about Virgin, the government has already announced handouts to regional airlines, offering cash grants rather than loans to the smaller operators.
You could not live in parts of regional Australia without regional airlines, and so we're kind of different in that sense.
Regional Express Deputy Chairman John Sharp has seen all this before as a Transport Minister in the Howard government.
It wouldn't be the end of the world if Virgin went under because somebody would come in and fill the space, as was what happened after the collapse of Ansett when Virgin rose out of the ashes of the Ansett collapse, as did Rex, SkyWest.
The idea that a new airline will just step in if Virgin isn't able to continue and take up that position is frankly a fantasy.
It's unrealistic to suggest that a new entrant will swoop into the market. It takes many years for any airline to build up the capacity. We'll be looking at 3 to 5 years at a minimum.
The options for the government are to take a shareholding in Virgin, which it has rejected, or to offer it some assistance with its borrowings, which it also rejects if it is company specific. Of course, it could also just do what it has done for regional airlines and offer cash grants to the big carriers. It's understood most of Virgin's shareholders, which include Singapore Airlines and Etihad, have politely turned down the opportunity to increase their share, facing their own problems at home. Virgin is now looking around for other potential Australian investors. There's a lot riding on the outcome, not just for 10,000 Virgin staff, but all the associated businesses and a tourism sector and paying public that has benefited from increased competition in recent decades.
We all know the Australian economy is taking a huge battering.